After establishing defensive positions near the MAC-V compound, Purcell spent the night there with troops from 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, the 2-5, who had also just arrived.
The next day, we moved out of the compound and started taking one building at a time, just trying to push as big a perimeter away from the MAC-V compound as we could.
For the Marines, it was their first taste of city fighting.
It was something that we had never seen, something that we weren't trained for.
Urban warfare is very different from jungle warfare because you never know where they're going to be.
24-year-old 2nd Lieutenant Michael Lambert from Atlanta, Georgia, was a platoon leader for a hotel company of 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. Joining the battle for Hue on February 2nd, Hotel acted cautiously.
They were very careful about exposing themselves to any open window or a place where they might possibly conceal a sniper or a machine gun.
But 2-5 had been sent into Hue piecemeal without its commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Cheatham.
We thought that was really quite an incorrect way to employ an infantry battalion.
A native of Long Beach, California, the 39-year-old Cheatham had joined the Marines in 1952 and served in Korea. He had also played professional football for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Colts.
Cheatham was a very impressive military commander. He had what's sometimes called command posture. He wasn't really worried about his own well-being.
On February 2nd, headquarters finally ordered Cheatham into Hue to take command of his battalion. Riding in back of the convoy the next morning was John Lawrence and his film crew.
Along the way, on a perfectly flat coastal road, Highway 1 in fact, the convoy was ambushed. So the Marines were firing out of both sides of the truck.
Despite the ambush, the convoy pulled into Hue safely.
When we got there and finally got to the MAC-V compound, there were people that were hanging off the balconies and firing and shooting across the street and crazy. Nobody, you know, they were firing all 4 directions.
Colonel Stanley Hughes, the overall commander for Hue, issued Cheatham his orders: clean out modern Hue south of the Perfume River.
And he looked at me and he said, if you're looking for more instructions, you aren't going to get any. Get going. And I got going. And as I started out the door, he turned around to me and he said, Ernie, I turned back around and he said, you don't worry about anything. You just clean those people out and you clean them out any way you have to. We have certain areas in here that we have blocked off.
Colonel Cheatham gave us a very confident interview about what his troops were going to do.
What kind of fighting is it going to be?
It's house to house and from room to room.
Kind of inch by inch?
That's exactly what it is.
Moving along the Leloy Street access with the Perfume River on its right flank, 2-5 began the attack on February 3rd under Lieutenant Colonel Cheatham.
He seemed to know what he wanted to do and gave clear direction.
Captain Michael Downs, 27, from Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, was the commander of 2-5's Foxtrot Company.
1st Battalion, 1st Marines would be on our left, and that if we even suspected there were enemy in the building, blow the building down.
But the Marines ran into trouble almost immediately.
We would learn a lot of hard lessons there.
28-year-old Marine Captain Ron Christmas from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, commanded Hotel Company of 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. After graduating from the University of Pennsylvania in 1962, he joined the Marines and was sent to Vietnam in July of 1967.
And what did they teach you in the books? They teach you to cross the street. You know, you pop smoke, you run a fire team across the street.
But as soon as they used smoke grenades, the Marines were hit by sniper bullets and fire from an enemy machine gun nest down the street.
We learned that we could not attack across the street by just simply throwing smoke. Every time we did that, every North Vietnamese in the neighborhood started shooting.
Okay, how are we going to handle this? Had a young lance corporal who had my 106 recoilless rifle. 106 recoilless rifle is a wonderful anti-tank weapon. I salivate every time I think of it. This young lance corporal says, Skipper, I know how to do it.
Amid enemy fire, two Marines rolled out the 106 mounted on a mule, a flatbed with 4 wheels.
Ernie Cheatham was down on the corner trying to show him where to shoot at. You have to understand that rounds are just cracking all around these two young men, and they're just oblivious to them.
The Marines fired the 106 down the street.
Boom. That huge round roared down the street. Mike Downs to the left said he thought it went about that far across his nose,
Under the back blast, the cloud of smoke and dust the weapon caused, 2-5 finally made it across the street.
We would learn that morning how to cross streets. We thought we knew how, but we would learn, that you had to do things a little bit differently.
On February 4th, 1968, the Marines renewed their attack on Modern Way, south of the Perfume River. They pushed to the southwest towards one of their final objectives, the provincial headquarters, 6 blocks away.
In urban warfare, what you want to do is you want to assault, and your success depends on speed, surprise, and shock. So it's imperative to keep moving forward as fast as you can.
But directly in their path stood a crucial enemy stronghold, the Treasury Building. With one company providing flanking fire so another company could seize the building, by the end of the second day, 2-5 had gained more ground. But the Marines found themselves overwhelmingly outnumbered.
They took on an enemy that was stronger than they were, maybe twice or 3 times as strong as they were. And the enemy was not attacking. The enemy was in defensive positions, prepared for us. And the Marines were attacking. And that's against all odds.
On day 3, the Marines attacked their next objective, the huge hospital complex that spanned 2 square blocks. Although the building was riddled with enemy troops, overcast skies prevented air support, and the close quarters of the city limited Cheatham's ability to call in artillery from neighboring Fubai.
As wonderful as our artillerymen are, I wasn't going to have them firing from 11 miles away and trying to fire into a building across the street from me. That's just impossible.
So with virtually no help from the outside, the Marines were on their own in what's called close combat.
It's a 35-meter fight. You're looking at who you're killing directly in the eye.
They weren't some little wiry guy running around the bushes in sandals. These fellas had full uniforms, big packs, and good operating rifles. They were anywhere between 5'6" and 5'10". I mean, they were good-sized guys.
Who gave the Marines, like Bill Purcell clearing out buildings on 2-5's left flank, a really tough fight.
It was probably some of the most vicious fighting any of us had seen at that point in time. Normally, you'd be in a pretty good firefight. It may last an hour, it may last 5 minutes, it may last a half a day, but then you're out of it. Here, it just didn't stop. That was the amazing part. It just did not stop.
By nightfall of day 3, 2-5 had secured most of the hospital complex, and the Marines dug in for the night.
We spent the night wherever we stopped fighting for the day, whether it be a chicken coop or somebody's garage or behind somebody's hedge. You know, we held the ground that we conquered that day.
During the night, fires illuminated the skies over Hue. Anything flammable went up in smoke. Ammunition canisters and buildings and trees hit by shell fire.
The next morning when you commenced your attack, you might have fairly smooth sailing as far as moving through the next block. And then, boom, right again, you would hit up against a defended area.
Let's get some men to check these holes over here.
By day 4, 2-5 reached the provincial headquarters, where they found enemy troops concealed in spider holes outside the building.
Still alive.
They'd dig these holes along the edge of the walls surrounding the courtyards, under shrubbery or under trash to make it look like just a pile of trash there. But they could peek out and just up to the nose and look at you, and then they'd slip their AK-47 up and fire a burst.
Despite taking severe casualties, not only from enemy fire but also from falling debris, Many Marines chose to stay and fight.
Guys stayed because they knew if they left, there's one less rifle that the other guys would be depending on.
I don't ever remember seeing people with that commitment of sometimes being wounded once or twice, and some 3 times, and still not leave. Or when they are evacuated, then find them sneaking back because they aren't going to leave their platoon or their squad.
If the Marines were taking casualties, so were the citizens of Way, who sometimes got caught in the crossfire. Others had fled the city or were being cared for in a secure area near the MACV compound.
Roger, I want you to get together with Mike then, and I want that building.
Meanwhile, Captain Christmas and his troops, poised at the provincial headquarters, couldn't help but notice the Viet Cong flag that had been flying in the courtyard since the takeover of Way, something that had galled the Marines. Hotel company worked most of the day, February 6th, just trying to get inside the headquarters compound.
We blasted a hole in the wall and ran across the courtyard. And immediately as we ran into the yard of the province headquarters, we began to take a lot of automatic weapons fire.
Rockmat 6, this Hotel 6, at this time I cannot tell.
The guys that got cover, got to the building, began to fire what's called suppressing fire to hold down the fire of these snipers that were in the courtyard.
Get a rope, tie his hands in back of him, and blindfold him. We've got the province building, we've got the complex.
I called back to Cheatham and I said, we've got the building, and I'm going to run up the American flag.
But someone monitoring the net warned Captain Christmas that it was illegal to run up an American flag.
I kind of turned my radio off, figured that was Cheatham's problem. You know, let him take care of that.
Gunnery Sergeant Frank Thomas had an American flag tucked under his jacket that he had taken from the MACV compound.
Hold on to that one right there. Just leave this one go.
The gunny and the fire team ran through and pulled down the Viet Cong North Vietnamese flag and ran up the Stars and Stripes.
Everybody started cheering and clapping, you know, and it was a rejuvenation of our spirit, you know, our fighting spirit.
Lieutenant Colonel Cheatham reported back to headquarters.
I told him somehow or other there's an American flag flying over the province headquarters. And that's when I was told to take it down. And I told him if anybody wants to come up here and take it down, just get them, try.
Hungry Hard Hotel Company.
Major Thompson was sent into Way on February 11th to secure the area along the Citadel's northeast wall. But dislodging the enemy from the Citadel, with its thick stone houses and huge surrounding wall, wouldn't be easy.
It was really an impenetrable wall. I remember Colonel Hughes said, "We'll blow that wall away." No, you won't. Yeah, we'll be 20 years blowing this wall away. That just won't work.
And to make matters worse, the South Vietnamese had also banned the use of heavy artillery to try to prevent destruction to the city. So without any additional firepower on February 13th, 1-5 began its attack.
We got no further than maybe 30, 40 yards. The sound of small arms was horrendous.
19-year-old Robert Carroll from Fresno, California, had been in Vietnam since the previous Thanksgiving. A Lance Corporal, he was in the lead with A Company when it was attacked.
They were waiting. They had every field of fire set up. They knew every cross-section. They had every second story where they could look down on us and see every direction we were moving. I remember running up to one house and rounds bouncing all around me, and I made it to this one corner of this house, and I thought, now I'm supposed to go further, but I'll never make it. I'll be cut down. And I could hear amongst all this firing all of a sudden, pull back, pull back, pull back, pull back, pull back.
It took us all day long to extract A Company, get their dead and wounded off the streets.
In the aftermath of the attack, Thompson got ARVN General Ngo Quang Trung to lift the ban on the use of heavy artillery, except for the area around the Imperial Palace. Major Thompson also called for the return of his Delta Company, which had been assigned to Lieutenant Colonel Cheatham to help mop up the southern part of Hue. Delta was commanded by 29-year-old Myron Harrington from Augusta, Georgia. A graduate of South Carolina's famed military school, the Citadel, Captain Harrington had joined the Marines in 1961 and was sent to Vietnam 6 years later. On February 14th, Harrington and his company went to the landing craft ramp for the trip to the Citadel.
But as we moved up the Perfume River, the LCU was hit by a small arms fire from the shore.
Nevertheless, they pulled into the Citadel safely.
When you looked around, there was utter devastation. Buildings down, vehicles burning, bodies thrown about, the stench of death all around you. I mean, the smell was just horrendous.
Major Thompson ordered Harrington to capture the Dong Ba Tower, dominating the Citadel's eastern wall. Infested with North Vietnamese troops, the tower was a key strategic point.
It overlooked the battalion's advance from the north down to the south end of the Citadel. So it was essential for us to take the position and have that high ground, or we would be unable to move forward.
Before the attack began, the U.S. launched an artillery and naval bombardment against the tower. Because of its flat trajectory, however, most of the naval gunfire overshot the target.
But it was very helpful in that it made a lot of noise, and I'm sure that it did some damage to the NVA just to hear it come over, and we were able to move up without being detected right to the base of the Dong Ba Tower.
Harrington sent Corporal Maurice Whitmer and his squad up on the wall, but they instantly came under sniper fire.
And the bullets were clicking all around us. You can hear them whining overhead.
20-year-old Whitmer from Long Beach, California, was on his second tour of duty in Vietnam.
Everybody's diving for cover, and we're throwing grenades and back and forth. And we got to about halfway through the tower there. And we're running out of grenades and ammunition. And we just started throwing bricks or anything else to make the enemy run. And after they started shooting a lot of rockets at us.
The enemy was also hiding in fighting holes and trench lines deep inside the tower.
And they just seemed to keep popping up. You know, you'd see one running around and just shoot at him, watch him drop, then you see another one pop up like prairie dogs.
With Whitmer's squad up on the wall, Delta mounted a frontal assault on the tower under cover of a tank.
The intensity of fire was incredible. I mean, you could not believe how loud it was because you had all these weapons going off, and the reverberation of the sound off the concrete buildings and off the wall just made the din almost unbearable.
Captain Harrington also made the difficult decision to call in the artillery from Phu Bai, 10 miles away.
We were attacking into the guns. Normally, when you do artillery firing, you want the guns behind you so that you can call it well ahead of you and then bring it back towards you so you can lessen the danger to your own forces. We were having the artillery firing directly at us. So we were calling the artillery within 50 meters in front of us. That's what you call danger close, and you only do that under the most utmost and difficult of combat situations.
Fighting up on the wall during the blistering battle, 20-year-old Lance Corporal Don Hammonds was hit by enemy fire and screamed for help.
He lived for about 2 minutes, and he died there with Megs and I beside him. You know, he's just telling us, man, I'm hit bad. What's my family going to do? What's my family going to do? Because his wife had just had a baby a couple of months before. And that was a hard one to take.
That moment, captured by Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer Kyoichi Sawada, was among a series of combat pictures he took for UPI during the battle for the Citadel.
I'm on the radio talking at that time, and I don't know why I'm looking off, but we must have seen or heard something off to our flank there that we were looking at.
At the time, Harrington was unaware that Sawada was taking this picture of him with his command post.
To have that cross just right there in the middle of it gives you a real spooky feeling afterwards to see that, because you know, as I was going through that battle, I knew there was something else there protecting me, and 32 years later, I see that picture, I see that cross, and incredible.
By the end of February 16th, after suffering 40% casualties, Captain Harrington's Delta Company had taken the Dongba Tower.
I was talking to his gunny sergeant the next morning, and the gunny called me over the side and he says, you know, my captain was magnificent last night.
After retaking the Dongba Tower, the bloody battle for Ancient Way continued as the Marines pushed southeast along the Citadel wall.
Every morning you would wake up and you'd hear the diesel tanks fire up, and you knew it was time to move out, and it was time to take another block.
But after intense fighting on the 5th day, Thompson called a temporary halt to the advance. Not only were the Marines encountering stiff enemy resistance, the weather was also no help.
It was misty rain and very cold, and that precluded air support. I think we had it 2 or 3 days. The sky would open, the sun would pop out, and we'd get a few strikes in, but that was it. It was very difficult to get helicopters in because of the weather and the ground fire. Getting a dead, wounded Marines off the battlefield was a terrible problem. We lost, some men died because we couldn't.
In addition to problems evacuating the dead and wounded, the Marines were having trouble getting ammunition and food.
Myself and a couple other guys started scrounging through some houses looking for food. I can remember these goldfish were in this aquarium. But the first night we were there, I went back to see about stealing these goldfish and frying them up, but somebody had already beat me to it.
The North Vietnamese, on the other hand, had no problem reinforcing its troops inside Hue. That's because the U.S. Army's 1st Cavalry Division, fighting on the outskirts of Hue, had failed to seal off the city.
The primary prerequisite for combat in an urban terrain is to isolate and cut off the battle area. This was never done.
The West Gate, the West Wall, was the NVA's resupply and reinforcement line. And they had a tremendous supply line, reinforcing them on a 24-hour basis.
Marine Lieutenant Alex Wells, 24, from Chattanooga, Tennessee, had been sent into Hue as a forward observer to call in the artillery for ARVN. Choppered in under fire the day before the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines arrived, Wells and his radio man were taken to an ARVN outpost near Teen Tom Lake.
I really had no earthly idea how in the world I was going to get out of this mess until the 5th Marines got there, and I figured, well, they'll rescue me, and the minute they get across the river, I'll be with them, and everything will be fine, and, you know, they'll wipe out all these bad guys. Well, that never really happened.
From his position inside the ruins of a Buddhist temple, Wells called in H&I, or harassment and interdiction fire, from the 155s at Phu Bai. He targeted areas along the west wall of the Citadel controlled by the NVA.
And every hour or so, we'd fire on these different numbered targets. And of course, you know, I numbered my own position as a target in case we were overrun.
For his part, Major Thompson rested his troops on February 18th, despite increasing pressure to get on with the battle.
It was the only show in town at that time. We were 12 days late. And Lyndon Johnson was very adamant about getting it over with.
The Marines resumed their attack the next day, making modest advances against an enemy that remained well entrenched.
It was not a kind of battle that you could hide diddle up the middle. Everybody outside still had the straw hut mentality. They had not adjusted to this kind of warfare.
There were 1,000 places that a rifle or a machine gun could be placed to fire at you that you just really had no awareness until they started firing at you where it was coming from.
I think the thing that I remember the most that really bothers me is just seeing Marines laying lifeless in the streets. It wasn't a matter of if you were going to die daily away, it was a matter of when.
By this time, some of the Marines were suffering from shell shock.
They just had seen too much. Too many of their friends being killed, too much violence, too much noise, too much fear, that their brains had shut down.
Still, by the end of the 7th day, the Marines were within 3 blocks of a key objective, the Tongtu Gate. A few days later, the Marines inched even closer when they finally made it to the southeast wall.
Here was that final little bit of emphasis and impetus that we needed to make that final push to secure the area.
The next day, February 22nd, Lima attacked down the southeast wall and captured the Tongtu Gate and tower.
The skies opened up. Here comes the airstrikes in, napalm, and the L Company Marines were within 50 meters of napalm. I mean, it was beautiful, just like you would write a script.
Meanwhile, Alpha Company was also finishing its final assault.
We have to charge across one area up towards the Citadel wall. And I thought, well, this is it. This is the morning I'll get it. Because, you know, I'm going to run out of luck. And we charged across that wall full speed, and there wasn't a shot fired at us. And when we hit the top of that wall, the feeling was fantastic.
It wasn't until February 25th, 3 days later, that the Citadel was declared fully secure, and in early March, the Marines pulled out of the city. But the brutal battle for Hue marked the end of the Tet Offensive, an offensive that proved disastrous for enemy forces, especially the Viet Cong.
From the military perspective, the Viet Cong suffered an estimated 50,000 dead, and really destroyed them as an effective military force, at least for the time being.
Even so, many believe that the U.S. came out the loser.
We had inflicted massive casualties on the enemy, and yet at the same time we demonstrated to the American public that we were no closer to overall victory than we had been before. And many Americans, not the least of whom was Walter Cronkite, began questioning the basic assumptions and the reports coming from Vietnam.
The battle for Hue.
Cronkite had flown to South Vietnam to witness the Tet Offensive, particularly the bloody battle for Hue.
If the communist intention was to take and seize the cities, they came closer here at Hue than anywhere else.
Less than a week after he returned, Cronkite declared the Vietnam War a stalemate.
But it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could.